I turned 18 years old the month I graduated from high school in May of 1984. The month 2 of my classmates drove a car at extremely high speed into a loading dock, killing themselves. Later that year, 2 teenage girls in my town, also students at the high school I went to, used a shotgun to kill themselves in a double suicide. These would be mimicked 2 years later as my brother graduated high school when another teenager drove his car into the foundation of a building, and later that New Year's Eve when another teenager also used a shotgun to kill himself. There were 4 other violent deaths during those years in my town of students who attended my high school. 3 were shot. 1 playing Russian roulette a block from my house. Another was hit by a train, and it was uncertain, although likely he stepped out in front of it on purpose. In my eyes, indisposed and disguises no one knows, hides the face, lies the snake. The sun is my disgrace. Chris Cornell sang about that struggle a lot. As for my hometown, there were news reports in the papers and on TV, articles in Time and Newsweek. One magazine article was titled "Suicide High." You don't live through that and not go back to it over. So I've been in that space since Chris Cornell killed himself. Space reinforced by the violent attacks in Manchester, England, and by the angry man stabbing 3 people who protected a Muslim woman the day Ramadan began in Portland. My soul aches. The ache's familiar, and it's come and gone since I graduated high school. There's no little irony in the fact that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. I had dinner last week, one night, with 3 friends from high school, and I've been reflecting the past week on my generation's growing midlife crisis and how it's probably related to a spiritual condition you don't hear spoken about much these days, acedia. A-C-E-D-I-A. In fact, I'm willing to wager until right now you've never heard of acedia, unless you read my newsletter column this Thursday. As one of my favorite spirituality writers, Kathleen Moore, says, acedia is not a household word unless your house happens to be a monastery or a department of medieval literature. Acedia is literally translated from the Greek, not care, or absence of care. It's a spiritual state of complete numbness and lack of interest. It is the inability to be invested in or care about anything, even yourself. Acedia was recognized in the days of the early church and by medieval theologians. The term comes out of a time in the early Christian monasteries of the 3rd and 4th century. The monks called it the noonday demon. Monks had given up everything for a life of prayer and community. But for some, eventually the sameness of the days and the repetition of the communal tasks and prayer led to a disinterested listlessness. Monking had ceased to be filled with the bliss and nirvana that it had when they entered the monastery. Instead, replaced with a sense of, what's it all for? And how did I get here? And is this it? They tried to live their life as a monk, and it didn't work out exactly like they planned. Chris Cornell saying, words you say never seem to live up to the ones inside your head. The lies we make never seem to get us anywhere but death. Acedia was eventually turned into or absorbed by sloth, deadly sin of the Middle Ages. But sloth as we hear that word, is laziness. And acedia is not just laziness, it's much more devious. It's the absence of spark, of light, of hope, of meaning. Acedia is a soul state of nothing matters and what if it did. Acedia is a human existential crisis about the meaninglessness of the human condition and what one's life has now come to. I don't think we hear about acedia much these days because the term comes from a time before the social sciences, before psychology, before what we knew about neurochemistry. Once we knew more about our own human condition, acedia became lost as we developed an understanding of depression and other mental illnesses. No doubt, much of the acedia encountered or experienced by the 4th century monks and the medieval scholastics was what we probably now term depression. I am not convinced, however, it's always good to have a backup when you notice the printer doesn't print your whole sermon. I'm not convinced, however, that depression and acedia are exactly the same thing. I think they are interchangeable, and I think they are intertwined. I'm sorry, not interchangeable as much as they are intertwined. In her book, Acedia and Me, Kathleen Norris writes, the boundaries between depression and acedia are notoriously fluid. How fluid is the boundary between our emotional and spiritual lives? I always think back, when I think about this, to a television program. 20 years ago, ABC ran a program for one season called Nothing Sacred. It was a drama series, 1 hour, about Father Ray, a Catholic priest in his inner city parish. It was written by a Jesuit based on his experiences in a parish in New York City. In an early episode of the series called Speaking in Tongues, they dealt with the fluid boundaries between the emotional life and the spiritual life. In this episode, a naked young man is speaking in tongues high on a city rooftop, appearing as if he will jump off. People are called in to help. Father Ray shows up. They eventually talk him down, but he's mumbling a lot of gibberish, and they don't know who he is. He has no ID, no identification. It was just in the days before everyone started carrying a cell phone. So he ends up, this young man, in the psychiatric ward and claims he's seeing visions of the Virgin Mary. He mumbles constantly in this strange language that Father Ray eventually figures out is Aramaic, the language Jesus spoke. Father Ray wonders, where did he learn that? The psychiatrist in charge of the young man's case argues with Father Ray about the wisdom of conversing with the young man about his delusions. Father Ray persists, arguing that the line between the psyche and the soul is fluid. And besides, Father Ray says, what can it hurt? The psychiatrist says it can feed his delusions, and he wishes he didn't do it, but he won't forbid it. Eventually, they learn the young man's identity. He's a college student. He had taken time off from college to tend to his sister who was dealing with leukemia. She went into remission, he went back to school, and as soon as he got back, the leukemia returned and she died. The psychiatrist explains that the event sent him into a depressive episode with delusional tendencies. The psychiatrist also says the delusions served a purpose. They kept him alive, gave his psyche a place to deal with the stress and the trauma. The delusions held him and protected him from shock, and when he didn't need them anymore, the delusions stopped. Father Ray comments that that was an impressive vision, to do all that. Hold him tenderly, care for him, protect him. The psychiatrist says it was a delusion, not a vision. And Father Ray says, by their fruits you will know them. And although the line between the psyche and the spirit is fluid, there is a line. There are still those who will offer prayer as a remedy to mental illness, and this is nothing short of spiritual abuse. Mental illness, including depression, cannot be prayed away. We don't want to confuse the contemplation of acedia with the suggestion that mental illness of any kind, including depression, is merely some state of unholiness. Far from it. Rather, I want to think about how mental illness is not only a psychological issue, but a spiritual issue at the same time. Spirituality and psychology work together. Healthy spirituality recognizes mental illness as emotional and physical realities, not sin or punishment or unholiness or unworthiness or lack of prayer. Healthy psychology realizes that spirituality is a necessary tool in the toolkit for psychological wellness. In my spiritual direction work, I've seen how mental health issues, especially those related to trauma and abuse, get in the way of spiritual wellness. Emotional wounds cause spiritual wounds. Sometimes, for some people, God is used as a source of punishment or shame. Sometimes God is promoted as a savior, but when the prayers don't stop the abuse, the trauma, or the pain, that savior doesn't seem very powerful. Or worse, God seems okay with your pain, even allows it or wills it. A well-developed spirituality can be a big ingredient in recovering and maintaining emotional health. A spiritual practice or a prayer practice, such as attending worship, belonging to a faith community, the companionship of spiritual writers and teachers, using a spiritual director, journaling, praying, meditating, all ways that spirituality assists individuals to recover and maintain emotional health. Kathleen Norris notes that the online Oxford Dictionary says acedia is an obsolete word as of 1933, no longer in use. But it resurfaces a lot after World War II. Is it any wonder? The death of God in the Holocaust, the worldwide violence of war. Any wonder that acedia, or spiritual lethargy, makes a huge comeback at that point in our recent history? During the 60s and 70s, depression becomes commonplace. By the 80s, when my generation, Gen X, comes of age, we have new classes of drugs developed specifically to treat it. Thomas Aquinas, probably the most well-known of the medieval scholastic theologians, said of acedia, acedia is being wrapped up in the sorrow of the world. Like all generations, my generation has had its share of a sorrowful world. We came on the scene when the idealism of the 60s gave way to Nixon. We came of age with less adult supervision and latchkeys due to an increased divorce rate, and the new world of needing 2 household incomes to make ends meet as downtown got boarded up and jobs went south or overseas. All the while, Ronald Reagan and the ethic of greed made it a character weakness to be poor or unemployed. The rise in depression jumped from the baby boom to Generation X, and it's jumping to the millennials. My generation was called slackers. And in the movie of that name, they note, one of the characters says, walking away in disgust is not the same thing as giving up. We aren't giving up. We're not slackers. Neither are the millennials. What we're dealing with, I think, is instead acedia, a spiritual malaise. Is it any wonder that the rise of the nuns, those who claim no religion, have become the second largest religious group in our country as my generation hits middle age? What are we to do? Now, in the age of Trump, basically Nixon on steroids, greed isn't good, it's great. And we stare in the face the reality of being a generation that will not be as well off as our parents. The early and medieval monks battled acedia when their life as a monk hit a wall and ran out of meaning. Now, at middle age, my generation, like most generations, runs into that wall on all fronts, at home, at work, in relationships. We are in a rut. Acedia is the foe of all who end up living lives of routine. Artists, soldiers, athletes, parents, partners in a committed relationship, monks. How do we battle this spiritual lethargy? We have remedies for mental illness. They're not perfect, but they help. Medication, talking therapy, behavior modification. We have tools we can use. The remedy for acedia is spiritual practice. The monks were encouraged to see their spiritual director, to renew their prayer life, return to the essence, the connection that drew them to begin that spiritual journey in the first place. I think it is one of our chief weapons to return to spiritual practice when acedia ascends. Our spiritual practices are different from the monks. The monks had the Psalter, they prayed the Psalms. For many people of my generation, the prayer book becomes the canon of alternative grunge and hip-hop music, dystopian fiction, and independent films. For many of us, organized religion was unappealing. The art of our generation became our prayer book. A prayer book to which we turn to cope with the sorrow of the world, as it might be said. Chris Cornell says he once spent a year in the house playing guitar and drums, like a monk for whom the days in the monastery had become meaningless. He says, I woke the same as any other day, except a voice in my head said, seize the day, pull the trigger, drop the blade, and watch the rolling heads. Whatsoever I feared has come to life. Whatsoever I fought off became my life. Just when every day seemed to greet me with a smile, sunspots have faded. And now I'm doing time because I fell on black days. Acedia. Cornell describes this acedia and how it intertwines with depression. And we recognize, most of us, I think, our own souls and psyches in the songs. I think it's why, for many of my generation, Chris Cornell's death hit us so hard. Things like his music were one of our weapons in battling the noonday demon. And his passing reminds us that the creator of the prayer book was himself battling depression and acedia. Sometimes the artistic vision or the spiritual vision holds us and protects us. And sometimes it can't. Perhaps acedia is itself a symptom of depression. Meaning and hope are two great gifts of the spiritual life. When they disappear, the soul gets sick. And when the soul gets sick, one of the first things affected is the ability to see meaning and have a sense of hope. Stuttering, cold and damp, steal the warm wind-tired friend. Times are gone for honest men, sang Cornell. Many of us battle acedia in these days since last fall's election, when it seems for many of us our political system is in danger of failing, and even common decency is in danger of failing. I think many of us are in a rut, either worn out from trying too much in our efforts to resist, or from being overwhelmed by each new news cycle that seems to find a new low each day. What are we to do? I think we do the most powerful thing we can when facing down darkness. We gather together, we gather our courage, and as Cornell put it, we try to live. Life is tenacious and resilient. We can gather our courage and take care of our mental and spiritual health. We can gather our courage and take care of each other. Be present to one another. You need not always know what to do or say to be there for someone. Sometimes all you have to say is, I'm here. What we do know is that it is a sign of strength to ask for help. It is not a sign of weakness. We know that talking therapy and medication help. We know to ask for help when we need it, to offer it when asked, to never take any talk of suicide or emotional pain lightly. Strip away the stigma of mental illness and acedia. Tell your story. We know spiritual practice helps. So let us make a choice to practice in all the ways we can. Meditate, walk, garden, pray, journal, yoga, come to church, feed the hungry, sing, dance. Try to live. An important difference between acedia and depression and mental illness is that mental illness is not a matter of will. We have no choice whether we suffer from mental illnesses. Acedia is just different enough. Traditionally, acedia is recognized as something we can fight. Kathleen Norris writes about how each day for her can begin with a battle against the acedia. How the simple decision to make a willful choice to get up and out of bed and to try to live the day ahead is a battle which you can choose to win. Each day is a day we try to live. And the living itself often provides its own victory and reward and help. But we must dare to do the living. Dare to do battle with the acedia and the depression. Dare to come to church. Dare to write our elected officials. Dare to make art. Dare to sing. Dare to share your story. Dare, my friends, to try to live.